Hello, welcome to another Photoshop training video from Plaid Dog Design. Today I'm going to show you how to color correct a photo very quickly and very professionally, and I found this technique 95% of the time works fantastic. The way we're going to do this is we're going to use gray to color correct, and the color theory behind that, if I bring up my color picker, if you notice in the RGB fields, as long as I'm on the far left, all three of those input fields are going to stay equal. And that's essentially how color theory works, is gray is equal amounts of red, green, and blue. Same thing in CMYK, equal amounts cyan, magenta, yellow, and black doesn't necessarily come into play with gray. But your three colors are going to stay equal in RGB. So the way we're going to use this in our favor is with our info palette. If we look and we find an area that's kind of supposed to be gray, and we look up at our RGB fields in our info palette, we notice that there's a lot more red. Red is at 137, green is at 125, and blue is at 99. Now this area should be gray, so all three of those should be the same number. And by telling Photoshop that that area is gray and that those numbers should be equal, and making those numbers equal, everywhere else in our image will fall in step. So let's go ahead and start, and I've made a copy of our background, and I'm going to just bring up the threshold in our adjustment layers, and if I bring this all the way to the left and then just start slowly dragging it back to the right, we're going to get blocks of black. What those blocks of black are is essentially the darkest part of our photo. And they aren't black right now. They're very, very dark gray in value, threshold level at 26. And we're going to mark it and then later tell Photoshop that that's not dark gray, that needs to be black. I have my caps lock key on right now, and all that does is it changes our eyedropper icon to a more precise icon, and if I hold down my shift key and click, it marks my image as well as puts that mark in my info palette. Now I'm just going to go ahead and drag it the other way and slowly start bringing it back to the left, and as soon as we get a blotch of white, that is the lightest part of our photo. So again, I'm going to shift and click, and it adds a mark in my info palette, and I'm just going to go ahead and turn off the threshold layer. And right now we have the number 1 and the number 2 representing the darkest and the lightest part of our image. The next step we're going to do is we're going to find the gray of the image. This takes one more step. Create a new layer, and we're going to fill that layer with 50% gray. So under Edit and Fill, and in your drop downs here, one of the options is 50% gray. Go ahead and hit OK. And we're going to set the blend mode to that layer to difference. And it gives us this wacky look, which is fine. I'm going to turn back on our threshold layer, double click on it to open it. Oops. And that's going to need to be sitting on top of the gray level. There we go. And again, we're just going to drag it all the way to the left and then just slowly start bringing it back to the right. And once we get a block big enough to select, that's probably good, right about there, we're just going to select part of that dark image and again shift click, and that'll add our third icon. We can go ahead and turn off our threshold, turn off our gray layer set to difference. Those were just being used as tools. You can actually go ahead and throw them away if you'd like. And back on our background copy layer, here's where we're actually going to change the color. Before we were just finding the colors, and now we're going to tell Photoshop that take those colors and change them to what we actually want, our black, our white, and our gray. So if you bring up in your adjustment layers your curves dialog, the curves dialog, a lot of us have seen, and a lot of us will use for setting contrast in the image and whatnot. The way we're going to use it today, if I drag those off, are these three eyedropper icons over here, filled with black, gray, and white. So if we select our black icon, bring it over to the marker that we had before, line it up, click, And you can see our image shifted, and we have a new line on our curves layer. It's doing it for us. I'm going to do the same thing with the white icon and come up to the area we marked before, click on it. It lightens, but it keeps our dark, so we have a good range of a black, black, a white, white, and here's the one that actually will do our color correcting for us. With our gray icon, we're going to come down and tell Photoshop that this number 3, and as I'm hovering, take a look at the RGB values up in your info palette down here. It's giving us what those values are, and once we click it, telling Photoshop that needs to be gray, and go ahead and it shifts, and we can see up in our info palette the starting point 137, 126.99 has now become 120, 122, and 120, which is close enough to gray. That two number difference isn't going to be enough. And then you can see if we toggle the curves dialog on and off, that was our before and that's our after. And by telling Photoshop that this is gray and having it adjust, every other color in this picture has shifted as well to give us a true color of this. Up in here in the alcohol bottles, the orange, the reds, the blues are now true reds, orange, and blues, and we've knocked out that extra yellow, that extra red. And that's it in a nutshell. Just kind of a two-step process. The first step, finding the light, dark, and gray of the photo, and then step 2, telling Photoshop that that's our light, dark, and gray of the photo. And that's the quickest, easiest way to color correct and the most accurate way of color correcting that I found today. So go ahead and try it out on your own photos. I think you'll be surprised to find how much of a color shift a lot of your photos will have without you even realizing it. And come by next time. Hope to see you again.